Welcome in to the PHNX Suns podcast brought to you by the DraftKings Sportsbook app, America's #1 sportsbook app. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast, and leave us a 5-star review. I'm Lindsey Smith here with Saul Bookman, Espo, and Gerald Bourget. Gentlemen, the simple question of the day is just how are you doing today?
Apparently, we're doing a little bit better than you.
I'm frazzled.
Not used to these early shows. Yeah, it's tough to get in the mindset for an 11:30 show when you're used to 2. You know?
Well, I mean, look, Espo, if you take away your drive time, it's basically right on time.
Well, that's true. Where we come from in the far reaches of the East Valley, it does take a while to get downtown.
That's fair. That's not an excuse that I have. I'm just frazzled from this early start because my drive time is like 5 whole minutes. So it's just throwing me for a loop today, but it's okay. We've got a lot of fun stuff in store for you guys on this show. And one of the biggest things that we want to talk about off the top is we may have a reason for the Suns' collapse in round 2 against the Dallas Mavericks. Are you guys nervous about this situation going on right now, or do you think it's going to make you feel better?
Well, let's mention what it is. And look, there's a rumor, which is I can't get it fully confirmed. I'll say that much. But there are indications that it's not just internet BS. All right. Earlier this week, or maybe been late last week, Dan Bickley did one of his Bickley blasts on Arizona Sports and suggested that maybe there could be a possibility that COVID was why the Suns had their issues in that second round series. I poked around, couldn't get full confirmation, but didn't get a full denial. So I'm starting to think there may be a little something to that rumor, and it would make a lot of sense when you start adding the pieces together, right? One of their assistant coaches was out with COVID. The new rules when it comes to the NBA and the playoffs is you don't really have to get tested if you don't want to. So you could feasibly get away with being sick and playing. So you look at it and it makes a lot of sense. And to me, would actually make me feel slightly better about what we witnessed in particular. And I have no background on this. There's nobody indicated that if it was a COVID outbreak that CP3 had it, but it would make kind of sense how he would go from what he was in games 1 and 2 to what he was the remainder of that series, when logically it really didn't make a lot of sense. That could be an answer. So it all would start to make me feel better, but I don't think it changes a lot of what we discussed in the Deandre Ayton situation. But I think it explains maybe why we saw some lackluster performances, in particular in Game 6 and Game 7.
I mean, for me personally, it would make me feel a little bit better. I don't think it makes me feel fully better, but I do think it changes the impetus of the offseason a little bit, because if you're coming at it from the angle of it was a quad injury or CP3's body broke down again, then that's one thing, and you need to adjust your course accordingly and make sure, like we've talked about, shift some of the burden away from him. But if he and Book and Jay Crowder, which is what the theory is saying, all had COVID, and we're dealing with that, that makes me feel a little bit better about why Book was terrible in the last 2 games. It makes me feel a little bit better about why Chris Paul disappeared basically after Game 2. And it makes me feel a little bit better about their prospects entering next year. I know it's not a full-blown excuse for what we saw. If you're out there, you are out there and you're expected to perform to your highest level. But it would make me feel a little bit better, and it would rationalize a little bit more of what we saw, at the very least, in my eyes.
This doesn't mean shit to me. I mean, I'm so tired of these excuses. We're talking about the quad injury or whatever. Again, like you said, Gerald, if you're on the court, you got to perform, and it doesn't excuse 4 games out of 5 where you absolutely didn't show up. But then you had that heater in Game 5 that showed that maybe it would not have been an issue, right? So, like, we can pick and choose what we want to believe and what we don't want to believe, but we have facts on both ends of the spectrum. They played like dog shit in games 3 and 4. They played great in game 5. Then they played like dog shit in game 6 and 7. So which one's the outlier? It looks like game 5's the outlier. But what, did they drink a miracle concoction to overcome their illnesses? Like all of a sudden, like, no, like they just sucked. They were awful. They were awful.
If it's CP3 in those 5 games and then a couple guys catch it in those final 2, it does start to make sense. It does start to make sense as a piece of the puzzle as to what happened. It's not all the excuses, like Gerald said. It's not all the answer. There were some other things, obviously, as well. But if CP3 has it, obviously, then other guys get it. It could answer why you saw guys ebb and flow in the series.
So then here's my question, right? DA is getting a lot of heat because he's so up and down and he's so inconsistent. He one game he has a great game, the next game he's not as good. He's not as dominant in the series, And then we see a scenario where DA is walking off the court and him and Monty get into it. Now, does this change the entire perspective of this? If DA's like, these motherfuckers got COVID out here on the court, they can't even play, but you're out here fucking dogging me and pulling me off to the side like I'm the problem. Like, it changes the whole dynamic. So, like, there's so many different levels we can take this to. We can make excuses for Booker and CP3, but then at the same time, if this is found out to be true, then I completely understand why DA would be frustrated and pissed off.
I would agree.
Wouldn't that be great, though? Wouldn't that be an ideal situation in kind of, at least in one avenue of the world or one theory?
It would be worse because of the way they're these rumors are going around about how they're pretty much done with DA or DA's done here in the Valley.
All of these rumors? That's the thing. We don't know who's starting them.
If DA is not the scapegoat, then fuck, at least at the worst, Monty should have been right off the bat, been like, no, DA's our guy, blah, 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 blah. But he didn't even fucking defend DA from the jump. James Jones is the only one that's basically said that he's still part of the team. He's still part of the plan. But like, you can't let DA fall on the sword if these 3 dudes are the ones that actually did get sick and it affected their play.
Both things can be true, though. DA could have flipped out on Monty and had issues that strained the relationship with Monty and DA, and those guys could have been sick. It's not one or the other. It could be all these things. And the reason we're never going to find out is because if a team admits that they played with COVID, that is awful. And the league setting the rules to where they can get away with doing it is problematic. So it becomes a bigger issue. And I think that's part of why we'll never know what the truth is necessarily on this, in part because it's a slippery slope if a team admits, yeah, we had COVID or one of our guys had COVID and we let him play.
I get what you're saying. I do. And I get the rumor mill and the gossip all out there and blah, blah, blah. But, the fact of the matter is they were dog shit for 4 out of 5 games against a team that was far less superior to them. And if they had COVID, if they had COVID, then the motherfuckers shouldn't even been playing because they're not only just putting their teammates at risk, they're putting everybody else at risk. And isn't that the same thing we crucified Kyrie Irving for not playing and getting the shot and playing? But maybe another. Actually, that's a bad example. Let's take Kyrie out. That's completely irrelevant. My bad. Wrong way. I'm glad
you walked that back.
I'm getting everything conflated. My bad. No. But
take a deep breath.
But listen, we can't be like give these guys like the out of COVID if they really did have it and they really did play, because the bigger picture here is just public safety and health overall. I could give a fuck about a goddamn basketball game at that point.
I agree. The whole thing, that's why the whole thing is problematic, right? And could be why we see such a weird, we didn't hear from any players and we haven't outside of McHale's interview. They didn't host in person, end of the year stuff, which was a little weird as well. There's all sorts of things that you look at and you go, okay, well, maybe that does make a little sense, but it's not right. You're right. But the league shouldn't have relaxed the rules either, where it gave teams the leverage to be able to pull crap either, if any of them have,
that's true. You got to put a little bit of this on the league too, for allowing players to have the discretion to get tested or not and play through illnesses, whether or not they know it's COVID or they're claiming it's allergies or just a cold. But that's not just on the players alone. That's on the whole entire system that's going on currently.
Do we give the Mavericks an out now for the Western Conference Finals because they just played 5 straight games against CP3, who allegedly could have had COVID, and then they got housed 4 out of 5 games against the Golden State Warriors. I didn't hear anybody get COVID with the Mavs. I haven't heard anybody get COVID with the Warriors.
The Warriors had COVID. The Warriors had COVID.
Steve Kerr had COVID at the beginning of the series, didn't he? Or at one point in this. Look, I get it, but you don't dive deep into the Mav rumor mill either, so that could be out there. I don't know. I'm just saying I heard it. I found it interesting. I looked into it a little bit. Maybe there's some truth to it. That's all I'm saying, and that at least gives some morsel of what the hell happened. Maybe it explains a little something.
They were trash is what happened. That's all I'm gonna take it for at face value.
I have a harder time doing that based on the season that we saw, but I don't. Again, you're not going to get away with any excuses. And to be clear, nobody on the Suns is making these excuses, from the CP3 quad injury to this rumor that we're talking about now. Like, nobody on the Suns is coming out and saying, "Oh yeah, that's why we lost." Like, they have taken ownership of it to a certain degree, maybe not as much as we would probably like. But I will say that rumor, if it is true, would make a lot more sense in explaining what the hell we saw than anything else we've come up with.
But I would also say, Gerald, like I would agree with that sentiment if they came out in the first series and just completely dominated the Pelicans, right? But they didn't do that either, and they struggled against the Pelicans. So I have a hard time believing that it just didn't carry over, unless you're going to tell me that they had COVID against the Pelicans too. You know what I mean? Like,
look,
and Jay Crowder, I thought Jay Crowder was probably one of the better performing Suns in the Dallas Mavericks series. Like, I didn't think he was affected by anything. He didn't look sluggish. He didn't look like he was out of character. He was actually shooting the three at a decent clip. But
he had 3 points in Game 5.
Okay, what about games 3, 4, 6, and 7? Well, not 7. 7, everybody.
Well,
was
you gotta think too about how COVID kind of works. It affects everybody differently. Sometimes you have a bad case that lasts 5 days. Sometimes you have a case that only lasts 1 day. Like, it's just all over the place as far as how it affects people. So one player could have 2 good games and then 1 really bad game and then another good game, because maybe that 1 bad game was when he got the thick of it.
Game 6, he had 9 points, 2 rebounds, 2 assists. He wasn't a shining star. It's not a total excuse either.
I will say the Pelicans are a tougher matchup too than the Mavericks were. I think we all agreed on that. The Pelicans, just matchup wise, with their offensive rebounding, with their length, with their size, were a tougher matchup for them on paper than the Mavericks were. So I get your sentiment that, like, the Suns weren't looking like world champs in that first round series. I do think that was because of the matchup and because their best player missed 3 of the 6 games that they played. I think that mattered in that series. The Mavs, I especially after game 2, we all thought it was a sweep, 5 games at best. It looked like they were going to run away with it, and then it just inexplicably changed. I still have not found any reason why that would have happened. This would at least somewhat explain it, although, again, I don't think we can make excuses. This team should have still won regardless of that.
I mean, all I know is I can guarantee COVID was going around these parts of the valley during that exact time. I can guarantee it. That's 100% factual, okay?
I don't know what you're referencing, Lindsey, so I don't know.
There's a couple things in there that I'm referencing, okay? So read into that how you will. I can 100% guarantee COVID was running rampant around these parts during the second round. Take that how you want to.
Take that for data.
The Suns weren't the only ones that missed Game 7, is what she's saying, huh?
Look,
I mean, that's one part of it.
It's not a total excuse at all, like you said, though, Saul. You know, this was the better team, and even with that, there are problems. It doesn't change everything, but it at least may explain a little bit.
My point here is simply this: I'm not letting these dudes off the hook because they played like trash 4 out of 5 games, and until I get some some actual factual evidence from reputable sources that are just point blank, like, I'm just always going to think they played like trash, they got outplayed, until something else more concrete comes forward. I understand why you brought it up, because I guess it would go to the fact that, you know, they played a little bit out of character. And if they had COVID, that could be a reason. But at the same time, I think there's a bigger picture here as to why that could be an even bigger problem. And until we hear that, I'm just always going to be like, you know what, these dudes are trash, and that's just how it was.
By the way, thank you, Josh Hunt, for letting us know that the first confirmed case of monkeypox is in Arizona in Maricopa County. I had to search it. It's true. It broke 22 minutes ago. So thanks, Josh. We really appreciate it.
Love that for us.
What the hell's monkeypox?
Go look it up. You don't want to know.
Hi, Yve. All right, guys. Any other final thoughts on the COVID situation with the Suns?
Nope.
Nope. All right. Well, I think this is a good time to remind everybody that maybe COVID isn't as gone as we would all like to think that it is.
That whole segment should have been sponsored by the Arizona Department of Health and Safety.
Look, it was all fake. It was just a great segue for an ad. Look at this.
You're welcome. We're getting real deep with these advertisements nowadays. We want you guys to stay safe and healthy and COVID-free so that you don't choke in a Game 7. COVID-19 vaccines are free for everyone 5 and older. Those 12 and older are also now eligible for a booster. Visit azhealth.gov/find-vaccine for a location near you.
And
all right.
Keep that handy, too, because monkeypox might be next in line. So.
Dude, monkeypox is what?
Saul Googled it.
Oh, no. Oh, that ain't good.
I have a question for you guys. If you were placing a bet on DraftKings Sportsbook app on the over-under, what do you think the over-under would be for how many times this offseason we're going to talk about trades that won't actually happen?
65.5 over-under. And I'm taking the over.
And how and like, is this like a per 30-day span? Is that what we're doing?
The whole off season? I don't know. I guess we could do per 30 day. I don't know.
If there's 120 days in the off season, it's easily at least 100.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say triple digits somewhere in that range.
I feel like it would be 150 because we do multiples in a day sometimes as well. So I think I'm going to put the over at 150. And like Espo said, I'm also going to take the over on this one. But if you guys want to play some bets, some over-unders, some same-game parlays, just some outright gambles, you can do so at the DraftKings Sportsbook app. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app right now. Use promo code PHNX. Make any $5 bet during the NBA Finals and get $150 in free bets instantly. That's promo code PHNX only at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. See show notes for details. So it's Trade Machine Tuesday. Let's cue up our Trade Machine graphic here because today we are going to talk about some Bradley Beal conversation. So this has been floating around on Twitter. We've seen a few options thrown out there, one from our friend Darth Voida, and Gerald, you put one together. And I think this just might be a really good opportunity to shed some light on how some of these things go down once again, because it is a very confusing situation and there's a lot of math and legalese that goes into it. So Gerald, do you want to start us off and kind of break this down for us?
Yeah, why don't we take a look at that Darth Voida trade again, if we have that. So here we've got Bradley Beal being traded to the Suns. He has a player option worth $36.4 million this summer. If this trade is assuming he opts into it, which is not a given because he could opt out and re-sign with the Wizards for, I think, up to 4 years and $180 million, and then 5 years and 240 some million. So he stands to make a big payday if the Wizards want to keep him around and if he wants to opt out. So that's one part of it. Second part here, we've got Jay Crowder, Landry Shamet, a 2024 first-round pick, and DeAndre Ayton going to the Wizards. The problem that I have here is that you look at what DeAndre Ayton is signing for with the Wizards, and it's a 4-year deal worth $42.4 million. And like, no disrespect to Darth Voida, but there's no way in hell DeAndre Ayton is agreeing to that sign and trade. There's just no way.
I'll sign 3 DeAndre Aytons for that.
Yeah.
That's how much I value him. So
yeah, so that one, I understand the framework and the thinking of it, but like he's not signing for what, like 10 million a year, 16 million a year, whatever it is. Like, there's no way that's going to happen.
If he was willing to do that, we wouldn't even be having this discussion right now.
No, you sign him for that. He wanted a 5-year, 170, $92 million max, whatever it was, last offseason. There's just no way he's agreeing to that kind of contract, especially to go play for the Wizards, who already have Kristaps Porzingis and who have Thomas Bryant as a restricted free agent this summer. Like, they're kind of set on bigs. So if you're doing that and you're the Wizards, you're finding a way to sign and trade Thomas Bryant, which, as we've talked about, sign and trades are difficult to work out. So I just don't see that one happening.
But is there a path forward though, Gerald?
Yes, Gerald. Have you sat down with the calculator and figured out how to do this?
Don't Grim Reaper me right now. Give me hope and optimism, Gerald.
Saul needs a confirmed to Phoenix, Bradley Beal.
Because I am rattled because all I've been looking at for the last 5 minutes is fucking monkeypox, okay? It is terrifying. I don't want it. I'm going to mask up fourfold, okay?
Saul went down the rabbit hole.
Oh, man. This is so terrifying. I'm so scared right now.
All right, look, I came up with a trade this morning, and this was just kind of a surface level first thing I could come up with if we could pull that second trade up. We've got Ish Smith and Bradley Beal going to the Suns, again, assuming Bradley Beal opts into his player option for Jay Crowder, Landry Shamet, a first-round pick that's unprotected, and Deandre Ayton being signed to a 4-year max. That salary would start at $30.5 million, as we've talked about in the past. This is closer, but you might have to throw an additional first-round pick in there for the Wizards in this case. There are problems up and down. Do they want Landry Shamet? Do they want to trade Bradley Beal at all? Would they rather just re-sign him and try to continue to tinker around with that roster? Like, there's a lot of stuff. And again, like, they already have bigs. They have Daniel Gafford. They have Kristaps Porzingis. They have Thomas Bryant. Like, it's just, it doesn't feel realistic unless you're getting a third team involved and making it a bigger trade where different pieces are going to different teams.
Yeah, dude, light me up. Let's go. Let's go. Bradley Beal in Arizona? Are you kidding me? Dude, I like that better than KD, to be honest with you, because I feel like KD, he's got maybe 2 or 3 good years left before it all starts to fall apart. But Bradley Beal, oh my gosh, he's a dog just like Devin Booker. Yes, all day. Yes.
Yeah, I think you're right, Gerald. You need a second team in this, or third team in this to make it kind of work. Send one of their bigs somewhere, get some additional capital for Washington. But if Bradley Beal says to them, look, I don't want to be here long term, I could see this being a path where you explore, and I'd feel pretty good about it. Not just because you get Bradley Beal, but it opens the opportunity to a dual-ish lineup, which I want. Ish Wainwright, Ish Smith on the court together. It needs to happen in Phoenix.
The other thing, though, we also have to understand is Bradley Beal does have some leverage right now because he could opt out. Yeah. And if he opts out, then the Wizards get nothing if he leaves. So, if the Wizards want something in return, this is probably a very good secondary piece to get Ayton and 2 first-round picks if that's what the Suns would offer, even if they were going to be late first-round picks eventually. But, oh, man, Bradley Beal. I don't think there is a trade scenario out there that we've discussed that's gotten me more excited than having Bradley Beal in the fold as a Phoenix Sun because, again, we talk about the mentality of this team. And one of the things that kind of came to fruition is that they had a tendency to look like they were too soft, right? Especially against a team like the Pelicans, who were physical and aggressive. And Herb Jones was doing his thing, and that was the perception, right? Bradley Beal will not take shit from anybody, much like Devin Booker. And I would love 2 of those dudes on the same team just going at it. Practices would be unbelievable if those 2 were on the same court together. Oh my God. Fire me up. Let's go.
Saul ready.
We really turned Saul's day right around when it matter of like 5
as long
minutes.
as I don't look at here, let me turn off this TV screen because I don't want to look at monkeypox.
Monkey what? Bradley Beal, damn it.
Let's go.
No monkeypox.
There's a lot of people in the comments that have a whole bunch of mixed feelings about this one. A lot of people are with you, Saul. They want Bradley Beal here. There's a couple of people who are like, You want me to give up what for Bradley Beal? Absolutely not. But Public Squares asked or kind of posed the idea, not sure how Beal fits with CP3 and Book. What do you guys think about the way that those three can work together? Should they be on the same team down the line?
Anybody can work with CP3. CP3 will incorporate them easily. Devin, that might be an adjustment because, obviously when you have somebody that is also ball dominant like Bradley Beal, it's going to take a little bit of feeling out. But CP3 is honestly the perfect conduit to both. You couldn't ask for a better point guard to be able to facilitate to two of the best shooters in the NBA. So I would feel absolutely confident. I think the first 10 to 15 games might be a little bit rough, but then after that, watch out. I mean, listen, Clay and Steph coexist. They both are volume shooters. They both have been fine. I think it's a similar model if you have Bradley Beal and Devin Booker.
Well, we worried about Devin when CP3 came, and could he coexist? Devin Booker, much like Jeff Goldblum said in Jurassic Park, will find a way, right? Devin Booker finds a way, and that will always be the case when whoever you surround him with.
And I think that could be the best of both worlds. Like, obviously, I think Book would adjust well. He adjusted to CP3 by continuing to lead the league in points per touch, despite getting a lot less touches as soon as CP3 came to town. So I wouldn't worry about that. My thing would be, if you're starting all three, you're a little bit small on the wing. But what you could do is take CP3 out, 3-4 minutes into the game, and then stagger those two guards the rest of the way. Like, CP3 and Beal works. CP3 and Booker works. Booker and Bradley Beal also works because they have enough ball handling, playmaking, and definitely shooting if you're adding Beal. Again, this is kind of a pie in the sky option. I don't know enough. Okay. All right.
No.
I don't know enough about the Wizards situation to say that they're like ready to move on. If Beal wants out and then he forces their hand, that could be one thing, because like you're saying, that he could opt out and leave for nothing. But if he does opt out, he could still re-sign with the Wizards for a shit ton more money than anybody else can offer.
Typically, I'm always on board with a player that'll tell high school kids, not one of you motherfuckers could guard me. And that's who you'd have to see in the league, right?
It's accurate, though.
Remember that clip, right?
Yeah, but what NBA player would you think would go, yeah, you all could guard me? Like, I mean, some of the guys that played for the Suns in 17-18 maybe, but like, I mean, I hope any NBA star or marginal star feels that way about high schoolers. Gerald, let me ask this, though. Some people brought up the idea of, could you just sign him outright? That doesn't work, right? Unless he's like, I'll take some poverty contract for 2 years and we'll wink get it on the back end, right?
No, I'm sorry to burst anyone's bubble, but you're not signing Bradley Beal for the mid-level exception. It's not happening.
But why, Gerald? Why?
So teams can go over the salary cap to re-sign their own player if they have their bird rights, if they have an exception like the mid-level, the biannual exception, minimum contracts. You can also go over for those. There are a couple of other exceptions that you can use to go over the salary cap and into the luxury tax, like we've been talking about. But with all the contracts the Suns currently have on the books for next season, without even talking about, DeAndre Ayton's potential extension, even if you got rid of DA, you're still working with limited cap space and not enough to offer Bradley Beal the max contract that he could get from pretty much any other team that would be pursuing him. So you can't go over the salary cap to re-sign Bradley Beal as your roster is currently constructed, basically.
So you've heard it here first. Gerald says Bradley Beal to the Suns on a veteran minimum contract. That's how it'll work.
Saul, I have some really bad news for you. You ready?
Sure. Why not? Let's give me more bad news today.
Hello in the chat said doctors are now saying that loving Bradley Beal is a symptom of monkeypox.
Oh no!
Yeah, I saw that earlier flash up, and that's okay. That's fine. I will take one for the team. Let's go, Bradley Beal.
So realistically,
would rather have Jessica Beal in the chat. It's good to know.
Realistically, what are the chances that a Bradley Beal to Phoenix situation even happens? Like, let's be more realistic with this one.
I don't want to play this game.
Gerald, you do it.
I'm gonna say like a 2 or a 3 out of 10. I'll go 2.5.
Oh, that's
Okay.
actually a lot higher than I thought you were going to say.
I thought you were going to say
technically
2% out of like 100. That's what I was thinking.
I
That's
was
technically 25%, Gerald.
Yeah, that's 1 out of 4. I like those odds, man.
Okay, maybe that's a little high. Maybe I'll say a 1. Give me a 1.
Yeah, I was thinking like 10%. There's a 10% chance. And again, this is completely predicated on Bradley Beal forcing his way out of Washington, which like Gerald said, I'm not too spun up on what his situation is over there. I know he has said he's wanted to be in DC multiple times, that he likes the organization, but everybody has a tipping point. And, I don't know if this is it for him, because I can't see anything on the horizon in terms of success for the Washington Wizards at this point. So maybe he wants to go to a contender and because it's better for his career. It's better for his exposure. Like, let's be real. When you're on a winning team, you get a lot of love. Look at Devin Booker and the Forbes stuff. So I just think Bradley Beal would have to be the one to really force that issue. And then once that happens, it's ball game. Like it's wide open. Anybody's a contender. Let's see what happens. So and I think the Suns' percentage of interest and the ability to maybe accrue him would jump up to like a 25-30% at that point.
Can we? I'm reading the chat here, and the
Yes.
trade CP3 stuff keeps coming back up. Can we put a moratorium on that? Nobody's making a move for CP3, and the Suns aren't moving CP3. So, I get it. This is all one giant thought experiment until July and maybe even longer. But that thought is one that isn't going to happen. It does not logically make sense for any party involved.
I hate to say never, but this is pretty as close to never as possible, just because, listen, not only, okay, from the Suns' perspective, if you could find a viable trade partner that you could trade CP3 and get some good value back for, yeah, you would explore it. Absolutely. But I don't think that partner exists. I don't think there's anybody in the NBA outside of one specific team that might be willing to take on a CP3, and that one team is in the same division.
Yeah,
that's it.
And you'd be getting Russell Westbrook back, so you're not solving anything. You're just causing yourself a bigger problem.
You're getting demonstrably worse. And look, CP3's contract is not that bad. If you look, the last year is a team option. No. The third year is, I think, half guaranteed for $15 million. So the Suns gave themselves flexibility. So it's not like it's this contract that they have to dump anyway. I get there's concern about CP3, the way he played to close that series, the fact that he's 37 now. But the Suns would not be where they are today. Nobody on this team would be where they are today without that trade. And he was an all-NBA player this season until he either hurt his quad or got COVID or whatever the hell you want to say. He was still an all-NBA player. I think people are way too low on Chris Paul right now. And heading into next season, I completely agree. They need to shift some of the offensive responsibility away from him into the younger guys. And you need to tweak your offense to do that a little bit. But this whole we got to get rid of CP3 stuff has got to stop. It's not happening.
Gerald, I understand where people are coming from in terms of how low they are on Chris Paul, strictly based on the playoff history and injury history that he's had. That's the only reason, really, because if he's not injured, right? If he's not injured, they might win the NBA Finals, because he definitely wasn't himself in the NBA Finals last year. And you could tell, because every time it seemed like he crossed over, he lost the ball because he couldn't feel his arm. And then obviously the hamstring when he was with the Rockets. And it just seems like he always is able to put together great seasons, but the playoffs, for whatever reason, is the biggest bugaboo for him, and he's always injured. So I could see why people are kind of at that point with CP3. He's a great player. There's no doubt about that. But it is frustrating when year after year, now we've had him for 2 years, and in back-to-back years, he's had multiple things happen to him in the playoffs. The arm, COVID last year, got him in the Western Conference Finals. And then we move on to this year, and it's the quad and maybe possibly COVID again for the second year in a row. It's frustrating as a fan.
It is frustrating, but my challenge to you is, okay, what are you going to do that's better? Nobody
campaign. What are you talking about?
Like you can't unless you're trading for a Damian Lillard, which isn't happening because why would the Blazers do that? Or a superstar that's even better than Chris Paul at that specific position. Like everybody on this team and Devin Booker especially loves Chris Paul. You trade Chris Paul, you had better nail that move for a star that's better than Chris Paul. And you're not, again, he was a top 15 player in the NBA this season. You're not going to pull off a trade for one of the other guys that made an all NBA team this year.
Now, I do have one more follow-up question for you, Gerald. We mentioned the contract, basically $45 million left on the contract for the next 2 seasons guaranteed. Is that enticing enough to be able to do something? Let's just say, for shits and giggles, if the Suns wanted to explore opportunities using Chris Paul, do you think that contract might be worth taking on in a certain situation?
I think so, but you'd have to be a team that is not necessarily contending or kind of like where the Suns were when they traded for Chris Paul, like a young team that feels that they can take the next step. And you're hoping that A, Chris Paul can help you get there as he's 38, 39 years old, and B, that he actually wants to go there. Because like with the Oklahoma City Thunder, they traded him to the Suns because he wanted to come here. They did him a solid for what he did for them. The Suns would owe him that and more for what he's done for this franchise. Like he got the Thunder to the playoffs. He helped the Suns get to the finals and helped them become the best team in the NBA until it all imploded. I don't know. I don't think his contract is that bad again. And I think especially like next season, that's probably a more appropriate time for this conversation. We'll see what happens this upcoming season. Does he break down? Do the Suns dial his minutes back? Is he able to still be effective? But the playoff thing, his playoff legacy as like coming up short or being a failure is really overblown. Like if you look at his teams, they have historically, for the most part, overachieved compared to what they were expected to do. But all anybody ever remembers is the injury against the Warriors when he was with the Rockets, or the injury against the Bucks last year. But like the Suns weren't expected to make the finals at all. The fact that they made it to the finals was something. And I understand the disappointment of coming 2 wins short. But like you look at his career, he's made every team he's gone to better, and they've gotten further in the playoffs than anyone was usually expecting. Like there are only a couple instances where he chokes, and that's going to happen if you're in the league for 17, 18 years.
Well, I mean, 4 teams that he's been on have been led to their best regular season ever under his watch. Like, I don't think there's any disputing how great he is. And I don't think there's any disputing how great he's been in the playoffs when healthy. But the problem is, and listen, this is a legitimate thing. Like, there's some guys out there that just have a tendency to get injured more than others. And that is part of their legacy, unfortunately. Look at Brandon Roy, one of the best 2 guards to ever to really play in such a short amount of time. But then microfracture surgery ruined everything. You know what I mean? So there's just some guys are just like that.
Look,
I think go ahead.
Go ahead, Lindsey.
I think instead of talking about getting rid of Chris Paul, we need to be talking more about what Gerald wrote in his article at Go PHNX, and that's how do you take the burden off of Chris Paul to allow him to still be effective on your team without relying on him so heavily. That, I think, is the conversation we all should really be having, because Chris Paul is still a phenomenal player. The veteran leadership is huge for a team like the Suns that has a ton of younger guys on it who are just now getting their playoff experience under their belts. I think the bigger thing is, how can we set this team up to not have to rely on Chris Paul as much as it had to over the last 2 years? Does that make the bigger difference moving forward?
Well,
Yes.
I mean, go ahead, Espo.
Just going to say yes. Bradley Beal. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, Bradley Beal. But I mean, also, like, listen, this is where we talked about Mikal and Cam and all these other guys a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. But this is where I kind of fall back on and like, yeah, you all should have helped him. Like, you have the talent, you have the ability, but you all disappeared too, and for seemingly no reason. Like, CP3 needed, like, I literally keep thinking of the Kevin Hart thing, like, help me, help me, help you kind of thing. And they all disappeared, all of them. Like, Mikal and Cam have to be better. DA had to be better. They all had to be better. And they have the talent and the ability to. That's what makes this, I think, even more frustrating, is that it's there. It's just, for whatever reason, they didn't come through.
Look,
Go ahead,
Gerald.
Go ahead.
No.
Oh, I was just going to say, and I think the biggest that goes back to, based on what we saw from Mikhail and Cam, and the way Monty talked about, did we put them in enough positions to go out and get a bucket? And based on, you're right, we can't take out the injury factor with Chris Paul, especially at this stage in his career. Although I do think people mix in fluke injuries like COVID and stuff like that with that, and I don't know if that's fair, but you can't take that out of the equation. And so the biggest offseason need for the Suns, aside from figuring out all the DA stuff, getting Cam his extension, getting Booker his super max, is getting that backup point guard and using that mid-level to the fullest of its capabilities to find someone who's an upgrade from campaign, to find someone that if Chris Paul breaks down again, you have somebody you can actually rely on. Because the biggest part of that problem in the playoffs was not that Chris Paul was playing at a subpar level, it's that they literally had no other options, no other way to go about it once he started to break down. And they needed campaign in that series, and he was nowhere to be found. So they do need to find a backup point guard or someone that can take some of that onus off of Chris Paul, especially if his body breaks down again.
Look, I am a big believer in mantras, and I feel like this show needs one for this offseason. And the fans, the Girthlings need one to get us through this. And I have the perfect one. At least we're not the Kings. Just keep saying it over and over again, and you start to feel a little bit better. At least we're not the Kings.
Poor
The bar
thing.
is in hell.
Dude, is the bar that low?
You didn't draft Marvin Bagley. You don't live in Sacktown, the worst nickname of any city in the world. Like, you can start to feel a little bit better. Because remember, 2017, they were at the same exact point, and the Suns at least have progressed past that. So at least we're not the Kings.
I would like to say one more thing in terms of the Chris Paul stuff and the load management, if you will. I think there's also one other person that needs to do a much, much better job of controlling not only, what Chris Paul is doing on the court, but how they're managing Chris Paul in totality. And that's Monty. Like, Monty has to do a much better job. He needs, as the head coach, he needs to take more control of the team by and large. Like, I think he's let Chris kind of dictate things because it's Chris, and Chris is like, I know my body, I know what I'm doing, blah, blah, blah. I think now we've hit the breaking point where, okay, I needed to take this into my own hands. And maybe if we play campaign, and I'm not saying this is what would have happened by it, if we cut back CP3's minutes, 5 to 6 minutes a game, and we give campaign more, and we actually tell campaign, like, hey, listen, man, like, this team's only going to go as you go. Like, maybe that changes the dynamic for campaign instead of just taking the back seat to CP3 and filling in whenever he's gone. Maybe he steps it up a little bit too. But I think the management part on Monty has to be better overall, not just for CP3, but the entire team.
I agree, because there were a couple people in the chat when I brought up, Gerald's article about taking the burden off of Chris Paul, and everyone was saying Chris Paul won't allow the burden to be removed from his shoulders. But here's the thing, like, there's a reason why you have kind of a quote unquote hierarchy within the organization, within the team. You have a GM and a coach, and then you have players. Like, the coach can make that call. It's on Monty and James to sit down with Chris Paul, really talk through this and come up with a good solution that everyone can get on board with. And like you said, Saul, like, Monty just has to call the shot sometimes and just be like, listen, you have to do this, not just for you, but for our entire team and organization. And that's just that. So come on, let's go.
I completely agree with that. He needs to have that conversation with Chris Paul this summer, because we've seen it 2 years running now. And Chris Paul has taken exceptionally good care of his body the last 3 years. If you look at how many games he's missed in the regular season, but then you get to the playoffs and it's a different story. They need to manage him better. And that was this year, his 15-game absence was with a fluke injury. He got hit on the hand. You can't do much about that. But like, even when he came back after resting for 15 games and recovering, his body still broke down because of how much he had to do in the first round. But I do think at this point with campaign, like he was starting for those 15 games and he played really well in that stretch. He got a chance to do a little bit more, but then in the playoffs, he still kind of disappeared.
Yeah.
I think at this point, the scouting report is kind of out on campaign. So unless he drastically adds something to his game this summer, I just think we might have reached our ceiling with him as the backup point guard.
We got a super chat from Libertarian. Thank you for your super chat. They said, at least the Kings drafted Halliburton.
And then traded him.
Traded him.
I don't
The
feel
poor
like we
Kings.
at least we're not the Kings. Yeah, at least, I don't think we give Libertarian enough credit. You don't read the full name. It's Libertarian Sasquatch, which adds a totally different tone to the name in the chat. So.
You know, here's the thing. I only read the first name now because I don't want to get got. Like, who was it? Johnny?
Johnny.
It was Johnny. I'm not trying to get got like Johnny, so I only read first names from now on. Like,
I forgot about that.
There is a strategy to this, okay, you guys?
Maybe you should let Espo
gentlemen.
read them now.
There you go. See if Espo can get it. Somebody can
Wouldn't
catch
be the
Espo
worst
off
stuff
guard.
I've ever said on a show. So go ahead.
All right, gentlemen. Well, thank you all for joining us for a fun chat about all types of things today. This one felt a little bit out of left field, just all over the place today, but it was a lot of fun.
Welcome to the off season, Linz.
Yes, I know. It's one of those things. Before we let you go, we don't have an ad read roulette today. We will be doing one tomorrow. And then I want to remind you guys that on Friday, you're going to want to be here for the show because we're going to share the poll results from our last draft. And the loser of that poll has to do something really that Shane's going to come up with. So join us for Friday. Start penciling that one into your book now because I'm sure it's going to be really embarrassing for someone on this show. You know what? Actually, you should do? You should go to your local dispensary. You should grab some OGs, pop one before the show on Friday because it'll probably make it even funnier for you. Or you can just chill out and watch us on the show. So if you want to do that, like I said, stop by your local dispensary or go to ogsbrands.com. That's OGEEZbrands.com to find an OGs near you and try out all the delicious flavors that they have to offer from their scratch-made THC gummies. Thank you for tuning in again one more time. It was an earlier show.
Can I say one more thing? Yeah. I know Espo was talking about, hey, at least we're not the Kings. I feel like today I just want to say, hey, at least we're not ASU. Sorry. I only said that because Gerald's wearing the shirt and then all hell's breaking loose at ASU right now. So it's kind of.
It happens.
I'm a Wildcat.
It happens. We'll
no
be
one
back
should
tomorrow.
be surprised. The Sun Devils live in hell, so it's fine.
It's true.
Facts. We'll be back tomorrow at our normal time, 2 p.m. So come hang out with us. Until then, you can follow me on Twitter at LindseySmithAZ. You can follow Gerald at Gerald Bourget. You can follow Saul at Saul Bookman, Saul_Bookman. Sorry, forgot the underscore there. And of course, you can follow Espo at Espo. Espo, take us home.
Remember, there's no vaccine for the ESPN trade machine. Ahoy hoy.